there are three kinds of circular knitting machine beginners. They're the ones that hit the ground running saying, this is fun. There are the ones who say, gosh, this is a lot harder than it looks. And then there's the ones that say, this machine's a piece of junk. Which one are you? Hey everybody, it's me, Margaret. I am primarily a charity knitter and crocheter, and somewhere along the line I fell in love with these little circular knitting machines. It just so happened for me that the top of the line machines are what I started with, and that would be the Addi Express King Size and the Addi Express Professional, which is a smaller machine. And that's what I learned on, that's what I played with, that's what started my fascination. And as I talked about my projects that I made in my show and tell videos, people would always say, but they're so expensive. And they are expensive, in the $200 range, depending on the size that you choose. And several people would comment that they were going to buy a cheaper machine to see if they could test the waters out, so to speak. And I knew that wasn't a good idea because I had picked up this machine for a very inexpensive price. I don't know what, and it didn't even compare. So that's what started my fascination with buying some machines, trying them out to see what would be a cheaper alternative to pass on this information to my friends. There's a common misconception that you just buy some yarn, buy a machine, load it up, and off you go, and everything's great. No, there is a set of skills that you will acquire the longer you work with these machines. Your experience may be slightly different from mine. Even if you use the same yarn and the same machine, it's the human factor of how we use the machine that could alter it. But that doesn't mean that we all can't find success. Now, one of my goals in doing this activity here this week was to put this machine through its paces because I really want to know how it holds up. There was another machine that is not here because it literally broke, and I took it apart and investigated what had gone wrong with it, and it's in the trash. But this machine is similar to that in size, and we really liked it. So I'm hoping that this one has the wherewithal to take some long-term use. So this week I have really been putting it through its paces using all kinds of different yarn, my scraps, leftovers, open skeins. I've just been having a ball, and in the process I realized I had to use just about every one of my circular knitting machine skills that I've picked up along the way to make certain yarns perform. So the purpose of this video is to share with you all those little tips and techniques that can help you find success with whatever machine you own. Tip number one, find a way to affix it to the table so it's not moving around. Now the Addi machines come with these neat little things that fit around the legs, and they're adjustable. They can fit to any table, and you just put it on opposing legs and it keeps it still. It's wonderful. They come with two for each machine. This new little machine that is my new best friend has come with suction cup legs. They come in a separate little package with the machine. You just open it up and pop them into place. Very simple, and they work great on certain surfaces, not so great on other surfaces. This table, for example, is wood, and it doesn't really, I mean, it kind of holds, but I need it to hold really well. So when I go to pick it up like this, it's not going to move. That's because when you're turning the crank, you're pulling up and down, and you don't want it to move around. Otherwise you could drop stitches or tuck stitches. If your machine doesn't come with a way to stabilize it, you could actually drive screws right down into the legs themselves. They all have a place where that could actually be done. Now that of course would require a dedicated table, but if you don't have a dedicated table, you can purchase some suction cups that attach with screws. You could also use rubber cement because it is removable. Now it is made with sort of a harsh substance. You'd want to test it on the surface that you're going to use it first in an inconspicuous spot. But it just rolls up and removes when you're finished with it. And probably one of the best ideas I've heard of came from my friend Erin, who came up with the idea of using command strips. Easily removable and doesn't damage the surface. My own personal setup involves C-clamps that you can purchase from any home improvement store. These are probably bigger than I'd actually need, but since we already had them, that's what I used. So what yarn do you start with? Well, in the United States, a medium yarn, a number 4 worsted, is probably the most common, and you'll find that here on the label. But I'm going to suggest that while yes, most of these machines are gauged for this size yarn, I'm going to suggest that you begin with a lighter yarn, like this number 3. And the reason is simply because you'll have less chance of putting too much pressure and strain on the machine if you happen to choose a heavier worsted. And yes, they do vary. Even though it has a number printed on the label, they do vary. So always begin your experiences and building your skills with a lighter weight yarn for the greatest success. Later, you can move on to other yarns. Now my next tip would be read and research. Look at your manual, see what comes with it, and then your best source of information is going to be YouTube videos and Facebook groups. And I'll provide links to some of those below. One question I get a lot by some frustrated users is, it won't knit, it won't stay on, it keeps dropping off. And that's because this is what they do. They put it in the little yarn feeder like this, and then they start trying to knit. And they say, okay, it's going great. And then they get going and they're saying, wait a second. Look, something's not right. It won't stay on the machine. And that's because they haven't done their reading and research. This is not the way to cast on. Now, while there are fancy schmancy ways, more advanced ways to cast on, that you'll do later, you always want to walk before you run. So the basic cast on is just every other hook. Once you make it all the way around and you put it back where it belongs in the yarn feeder, then you can begin the knitting process. And it will stay on. I'll put a link to the proper tutorial for casting on and off and changing colors in the description box below. Be prepared to try different yarn, and it doesn't matter if you heard someone say that a certain yarn worked wonderfully on their machine. It may not work for you, so just know that. That's a fact of it. So I'll give you an example. This yarn, this is a variegated yarn from Craft Smart, which is the Michaels brand, cheap, off brand, whatever, and it would not, oh, it was horrible. Now I got through it on this little machine. I got through it for 1/2 of my reversible hat, but I gave up and used another yarn for the inside because it was just too difficult to work with. Now, as a rule, the acrylic variegated yarns are often, they just feel different. And yet this, which is a Red Heart variegated yarn, camo, it worked fine. It worked just fine all the way through the machine, no problem. And if you look at them closely, you really can't see a difference. I don't know why, but I think the different dyeing processes or maybe the different colors affect the texture in some way. But regardless, I tried every trick in the book to try to make this yarn work better, more smoothly, and it just didn't like it. So I will not be using it again on this machine. So when's a good time to know you should just give up on a yarn? Well, not until after you try some tips and tricks. That brings us to tip number 5, which is adding weights to your work. Clipping something to the beginning yarn tail can help with the cast on, then turn slowly until you've created enough fabric to clip or hang weights all around. The weights increase tension, which will help the stitches stay in the right places. Now, weights can be anything that you can clip or hang on your work. Now, these came with another knitting machine, the one I mentioned earlier that didn't last very long, but they gave me some great weights. You could also use binder clips. These are the small size, but I would imagine the bigger size would be even better. These came from the Dollar Tree. I got these I think it was about 10 for $1, something like that. They're excellent. Good old clothespins would work as well. And this is a chip clip, which is what I used to use all the time before I even had this. Another thing I've seen people do is they go to the dollar store and buy a bunch of forks. And then, well, this is my real fork, so I can't demonstrate for you, but you get some pliers and you bend the tines into little hooks, and then you can hang it off your work. Usually just one round of these is all the weight that I need, but sometimes if you have a particularly stubborn yarn, you may want to add more weight to each of these. And that's why I like ones that have little holes on them. These right here would allow me to add more weight to each clip. Now the way I would do that would be a good old paper clip. You could just take that, open it up like I've done with this one, and then you can literally hang something else off of there to just add more weight. What do you hang? Whatever you can find. Okay, so you've added weight and it's still not working well, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna give up. Wait, not yet. Go very, very slowly so that you can keep your eye on what's happening. That eye needs to be focused just to the right of the yarn feeder so you can see what's happening when it takes the yarn down, making sure that it gets caught around those two little teeth. Now, if you have a machine like this, you're not going to be able to catch a mistake as it happens. It's because all the work is being done below the surface. So in this case, you'll have to learn some of your other skills, like how to fix a tuck stitch after you get the work off the machine, and it is possible to do that. So again, you'll find that in your reading and research. I'll put a link in the description box below. So you've added weights, you've gone nice and slow, you've kept your eye exactly where you need to, and it still is giving you a headache. Don't give up yet. Some yarn takes about 10 or so rows, could be 10 to 15 rows, before it decides to cooperate. And after that, it works like a charm. So to answer that initial question, when to give up, after you've done everything and you've gone at least 15 rows, if it's still giving you a headache, take it off the machine and try a different yarn. Now here comes another practical application of tips numbers 6 and 7. Now there are extenuating circumstances that could affect your work as well. For example, I've switched from a number 4 worsted to a lighter one, I'd say a DK or sport weight yarn. And on the first few rounds, it's going to want to jump off the little teeth. As you can see right here, it's supposed to go around the teeth and stay right there when it reaches this point. But it keeps staying up high right here. Now I know, because I've done this enough times to know, that you just stick with it for the first 2 rounds or so, and then it's going to take over and everything's going to work beautifully. So in the meantime, you just have to be patient. Turn the crank very slowly until you see with your own eyes that it is caught around those little teeth. And if you can see ahead of time, you can shove it down to avoid it popping off. Okay, it looks like it's cooperating now. So once I'm confident, whoop, look right there, popped off. These little things are easy to move up and down a little ways, so it can help you keep it from getting caught on the actual hook by lifting it up a little bit. Of course, you can also turn your crank back just slightly, just be aware. Alright, so I was wrong. It is still catching, but I'm not ready to give up. I'm going to stick with it. Think of it as a friend with problems. You're not going to give up on your friend right away, right? You're going to help your friend work through it. And that's exactly what you're doing right here, is helping the machine work through the change. And look, we've had a breakthrough, yay! Now another good reason to tension your yarn in your left hand is in case you come across a knot. Now I've deliberately created some knots for us to show you this. Alright, so you're going along, you've got it feeding through your left hand and you feel the knot. Now, the good thing about this is either you can cut it out if you would like to and join in the regular way if you don't want to have this knot there, or you can merely do this. Now, I suggest this for any machine, no matter which one you're working with. Get it out of the yarn feeder and hold it to where the hooks will catch it, just as normal. And once you pass the first hook right here, see my knots right there, you can go ahead and put it back in the back in the yarn feeder properly. Make sure it gets all the way down in there. Now, the reason why you want to do that is because the knots, depending upon their size, may get caught within here and get stuck. And you'll be going along, and all of a sudden, it'll just yank to a stop. And it could totally mess up whatever. The yarn could jump off, you could drop a stitch. Lots of things could go wrong. So if you feel the knot, either stop, cut it out, or stop, pick it up, and hold it away out of the way of the yarn feeder. Now, my point in sharing these tips with you is so that you'll know that there are skills, there are tips that you need to know, just like it would be for any craft, in order to find success on one of these circular knitting machines. Every now and then, you'll run into one that really is a piece of junk, and that's where this one came in. And it's the first review I did. I hesitate to give you a link to it because I'm so embarrassed over the quality of that video that I did so many years ago. But if you see a machine that's like this with no legs on it, this is the one not to buy. Other than that, play, keep your mind open, use different yarns, experiment, practice. And I think that you'll find great success with these little machines. If you have any great tips that you'd like to share, put them in the comment section below. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So thanks for watching. Hope this helps somebody. Talk soon. Bye.